you're going to have the number one overall pick, you have an opportunity to take a franchise potentially changing quarterback in this draft. And the first two guys that are going to come up that we're going to have to talk about, we're going to have to talk about CJ Stroud at Ohio State, and we're going to have to talk about my favorite player, Bryce Young down at Alabama. So I'm anxious to kind of dig in here to talk about those two a little bit and what I've seen. I've done some work down at Alabama. I've seen Bryce Young play in person, and it is amazing for as small as he is. He's not a big guy. He's maybe 6 foot. He's maybe 190 pounds. But the vision this guy plays with, the arm strength that he has, the mobility he has in the pocket, the way he buys second chances. When I watched him, and I try to compare him to what guys that I've seen coming out in the draft, but it was hard to compare. And people are going to say I'm crazy, but that's why we do on the show, right? We come up with different theories to throw things out there to see if they stick against the wall. That's what we did in draft meetings. But watching him operate Alabama's offense is like watching Steph Curry of the Golden State Warriors operate their offense in basketball. And some of the plays that he makes on the field, and I've seen it live in person, is I'm not saying he's Patrick Mahomes, and everybody wants to try to compare him to maybe a Kyler Murray type guy, but his vision and for how small he is makes plays like Patrick Mahomes makes plays on Sundays for the Kansas City Chiefs. The other thing that really stuck out to me about him was for a guy that's maybe 6 foot as a quarterback, rarely did I ever see him, and I can't recall any games that I've seen him get balls batted at the line of scrimmage. So he has that ideal instinct to find open windows between all those trees that are in front of him and to deliver the ball on time into his playmakers.
So here's the thing, and we've talked about this for sure, Rick. I think I mentioned to you that I went back and looked going back to 2000 in terms of the combine measurements, and the only two quarterbacks that stack up physically, and I mean on the short side, obviously, and even light, because Bryce doesn't weigh that much, Seneca Wallace and Joe Hamilton. Now, neither was a first-round pick. In fact, both were day 3 picks. I think one went in the 5th and one went in the 7th, and neither had a long-term career as an NFL quarterback, not necessarily because they were small, but there is no precedent for it. So, and you know this certainly better than most people on planet Earth. If you're sitting there with the number 1 pick and you have to absolutely hit a home run, are you going to take a Will Anderson who feels like a Chase Young, Nick Bosa layup, or are you going to mortgage the future on a small quarterback? And look, he's not as thick as Kyler. He's not as thick as Russ. So you can't even lean on that.
Oh my God. Well, you're going to throw CJ Stroud out? And he's not even a part of this conversation.
Let's bring in CJ Stroud. And look, let's even bring in Will Levis, because he is so controversial. I was talking to a team last week that is dead set against Bryce Young, and they would take Will Levis before Bryce Young just because of the physical stuff. Right. I agree.
Yeah, there's rumors out there already, and we haven't even got to December yet. Okay, just let's go back and say, I watched the tape on all your comparisons, I guess, if you want to make that from a size standpoint, to Bryce Young, and neither of them have the skill set to play the position like Bryce Young does. And the other thing you have to remember is when you're watching these NFL games on Sunday, and we watched the game last night where the Monday Night Football game turned into a Monday night track meet, the way Jalen Hurts was running up and down the field, the game has evolved differently where guys like a Bryce Young have an opportunity to be very successful in the league because even though he's on a smaller side, all these quarterbacks coming out are extremely good athletes that have some mobility and are able to make off-schedule type throws. And I believe that that Young can definitely do that. And if you want to throw, we can go down the road here and throw CJ Stroud into this mix because he is probably the best physically as far as his physical stature, fitting an NFL prototype quarterback. He has an extremely talented arm. When you watch him on tape, he can make all the NFL throws that you need to make. he's playing now with some receivers that are real dudes that are going to be playing in the league and has always played. And Marvin Harrison Jr. is the next one coming.
He might be all right, I think.
Yeah, but I don't know if Alabama has the same talent at receiver that they've had in the past. So that was something that maybe Bryce didn't have that he had the year before, because Alabama has always had, tremendous talent at that position. That a lot of first-round picks came out of Alabama at the receiver position. But getting back to CJ Stroud, the one thing is that I wish at times he would get through his progressions a little quicker. At times he holds the ball. Like I said, he's more than talented enough to be a starter and be a franchise guy in this league. But there are still a few holes that people are going to poke with him. And can he throw the ball in tight windows when his receivers aren't getting as open as they are at Ohio State because they're just better athletes? If you want to compare CJ Stroud to Justin Fields, he is a better pure thrower from the pocket than Justin Fields is, but he's not the same athlete that Justin Fields was coming out. So those are some of the things that I've seen so far between these two.
So if you're watching on YouTube, Debo just had up my most recent mock draft, which is based on reverse Super Bowl odds. So the Panthers were picking third there. I had them taking CJ Stroud because it certainly feels like owner David Tepper, he ain't waiting around for another quarterback. He's going to go get one. So let's talk about CJ Stroud a little bit more, Rick, because I think at this point in their development, in terms of where they were in their Ohio State careers, I think you're right. I think CJ Stroud is a better thrower of the football. He doesn't throw with a ton of anticipation, maybe because these guys are always wide open. But when you're trying to do the next step evaluations, because Justin Fields struggled in year one and early on in year two, and part of that was the offense, how they had structured it around him. Who is better at this point in their college careers, Justin Fields or CJ Stroud?
I think CJ Stroud's better at this point if he does come out. I'm assuming they're coming out in the draft. Because if I still worked for an NFL team, I'd be fined $1,000 every time I brought up all these juniors coming out. So, but it's okay to do it when you're on the media side. But I think that CJ Stroud is farther ahead than Justin Fields was at this time. The issue I had with Justin Fields when he came out was that I didn't know how quickly he got through his progressions.
Yeah.
And I thought that the best offensive fit him was that you did play action, you rolled him out, you reduced his read. So, okay, if one's not open, throw it to two and just let him go out there and play and use his natural athletic ability. And then you saw what Chicago did with him. They finally figured out what is Justin Fields' strengths, and now they're utilizing that. And that's why all of a sudden he's went from a bust that people thought maybe earlier this year to maybe their franchise quarterback, what looks like their franchise quarterback in Chicago right now.
Yeah, he's looked great.
Yeah, and a lot of it will be determined too on once you start this process, when you get through all the intelligence scores, the mental quickness scores, the interview process, that'll start separating some of these guys. But I think at this point, you're purely talking about right now, and what we did in our December meetings is we'll get all that information in due time. But let's right now just talk about what we're seeing on tape and why we like or don't like a guy.
Yeah, so look at that. Will Britson popped up, even on time, Debo. He has a question. He's the host of the Pick Six podcast. Rick, if you haven't been introduced to Will Britson, you certainly will be. He asked a question. Has Justin Fields ended the OSU quarterback stigma? Is that a real thing? Does it raise eyebrows with Stroud? Because if you remember before Justin Fields, it was Dwayne Haskins who came out as a first-round pick, and his career was up and down in Washington. He landed in Pittsburgh before he unfortunately passed away over the summer. But there were questions, and you sort of hear those questions at other positions out of other schools too. Used to be Big Ten running backs that couldn't withstand the pressures of the wear and tear of the NFL. So where are you on? Is there a stigma with quarterbacks that are coming out of Ohio State? Is it a function of the offense, or is that just media creation?
I think you have to judge each individual player on their own merit. I mean, you can't just say because this guy failed that anyone else coming out of Ohio State as a quarterback's always going to fail. So they're totally different skill sets as well. But I think, once you start delving into the things that will tell you whether this guy is going to be an NFL franchise type quarterback is when you start digging into his background. Does this guy come in and study tape on his own? How many hours? I know they got the 20-hour a week work rule in the college level. How much time does he do on his own? And what's really interesting is when you get these guys, and especially these franchise quarterbacks, on the board, how quickly can they process and talk through what you're trying to explain? Because the defenses they're going to see in the NFL is totally different than the defenses they're going to face in college. And probably my biggest mistake that I made was when we made a mistake on a quarterback. The issue wasn't the intelligence part, because I always thought intelligence made the difference in a quarterback at this level. It wasn't always the athletic traits or the strongest arm. And I always made a comparison when I went and saw Jamarcus Russell throw at LSU, and then the next day or two I went up and watched Matt Ryan throw, and there wasn't even a comparison who had the best arm talent.
Right.
But what makes the difference is the intelligence part of the game. And where I made a mistake is I put so much emphasis in the intelligence side of it that I didn't take into account, and you learn from your mistakes, is the mental quickness side and how quickly are they processing. So we came up with different ways to try to test mental quickness and how quickly they can process things. Like, I could have a quarterback go up on that draft board and draw, offensive passing scheme. He can draw the protections. You can say, okay, this safety's coming down at the edge. How are you going to make your adjustments and who you're going to throw to? And for 20 minutes, he can get up there and talk and sound better than your offensive coordinator who's trying to explain to him. Where the difference is, and where we really try to hone in on it, was, can you do that in 2.5 seconds or less instead of the 20-minute dissertation you just gave us? And do that with a bunch of guys with bad intentions on the other side, breathing down your neck.
That's a BMAC-ism, bad intentions there.